Welcome to Innovation Alchemy. My name is Adam Castle. I am your host, and this is the podcast that explores the magic, the mess, and the mastery of innovation and those who are bold enough and brave enough to build it. Now, before we get started today, I want to give a shout out to our amazing producer, John, and the team at Clear Rock. If you've been following along with the podcast these last few years, Clear Rock Studios in Windsor has been making us sound good and maybe look good for over the last couple of years, and we are so grateful to have them on their team. Now, this series of podcasts and this episode that you're about to watch today is part of a series that focuses in on our annual ScaleUP Accelerator. The ScaleUP Accelerator brought to you by the Government of Ontario and Libro Credit Union, as well as FedDev Ontario. Now, ScaleUP is a 6-month accelerator program that focuses on companies that are in that sweet spot going from 0 to 1. And so a lot of the questions today are going to be around that 0 to 1 phase. And you might be asking, what in the heck is 0 to 1? And I'm very glad you asked, because 0 to 1 is that point where a business goes from idea to impact. It starts to have real things like real customers, real challenges, and real constraints. And so when we're talking to these startups, they're at that point where real is becoming really tough. And so we're really excited to have these conversations today to dive into that very specific stage in a startup life cycle and have you learn along with us. So thank you so much and enjoy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'm joined today by Josipa Petrunic with Transit Rewards. Josipa, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I'm really excited about your company and excited to dive in today about what it is you're trying to solve.
Now, that's good because there's two of us excited about it.
Perfect, yeah. Now, public transit really shapes cities. And beyond that, it is such a powerful economic development tool, one that is very near and dear to my heart as an economic developer. And you're starting to reframe that. You've reframed it both for the transit riders, the transit commissions that you're being a part of, and the cities that kind of house these systems. What is Transit Rewards? Who's it for? And what problem are you really trying to shift with this platform?
Yeah, well, and maybe I'll start by giving the context because most people don't know how big the transit industry is even. Like, what is this thing, right?
Yeah.
So I'll talk about Canada. In Canada, we have over 25,000 buses on the road right now that are your standard kind of transit bus, like what you'd associate with normal transit. It's over 30,000 if you include the shuttles and the coaches and so on. We've got about 180 transit agencies. Some are amalgamated, so it's between 120 and 180, depending how you count. Like BC Transit has 8 to 20 within their network. So that's the marketplace. And every day in Canada, 10% of Canadians, almost 11% now, take transit just to commute. So that's not including students and anybody else. Just commuters is about 1 in 10 people. Now that's low by OECD standards. It should be quadruple that in our big cities, but that's the marketplace. And there are about 25,000 manufacturing jobs in Canada making buses and rail cars. So it's a substantive industry. There's about 66,000 drivers and mechanics out there. So about 100,000 people make their direct income off this industry. But of those people who take transit, that 10%, they pay their income tax only because they can get to work on a transit bus. So that's a standing army of people. And in the United States, there's about 27 million people every single day that take the bus. So the idea of Transit Rewards is we've got 3 problems. One is a lot more people should be taking transit. And why aren't they? And the big problem there for transit is, well, they don't put buses where people need to go. And they don't go where people need to go because they don't know where people are going. So our transit agencies know almost nothing about their transit riders. And that's the first problem. They don't know who you are, Adam. They don't know what your income is. They don't know whether you're a man or a woman. They don't know usually where you're getting on. Now more they know where you're getting on with a smart card, but they don't know where you're getting off. So they can't design around the transit rider. So that's problem number 1. Problem number 2 is the bus is late. So you're upset, you're pissed off. And if you're not that price sensitive, you might get into an Uber. So transit has no way to say, hey, Adam, we're so sorry that we were late and underperformed. Here's some kind of compensation for you to attract and retain you, right? So 2 problems. The third problem is post-pandemic. Most cities have come surging back, so we're not having a problem getting people back into transit in general, unless you're downtown Toronto or Ottawa where there's been LRT problems. Generally, ridership's coming back. And the problem there is that we don't have enough buses on those routes that are popular, so you feel like a sardine in a crushed cabin. And there's no way for transit to say, hey, we love you, rider, but maybe don't take the bus at 5 o'clock. Could you take it at 5:45? We'll give you some kind of compensation, but we want to shift your demand. So we don't know anything about you. We don't know how to shift your demand. We don't know where to send the buses. It's guesswork at best. And that is why transit right now today, about 1 in 10 Canadians take it, but it could easily be at 1 in 2 Canadians taking it if we actually made the system work. And that's what Transit Rewards is all about. It's a loyalty program. It's meant to reward you. It's like the air miles of transit. And Adam, you're going to download it to your phone. It's going to track you as you get on the vehicle. It's going to track you when you get off based on your consent, how much you allow it to track you. And in sharing your data with the transit agency about where you get on, where you get off, who you are, what your income is, what kind of background you have, the more data you share with the agency, the more points you generate. And as a result, you're getting paid to ride. But the transit agencies are getting all the data they don't have right now to figure out where they should send their system.
That's awesome. I mean, 3 problems, but it really is one problem, which is there's a black hole of insights that no one is getting, either the rider or the agency or the governments that are supporting these pieces, right? Yeah. And I know ESG and that is another layer on top of that. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, for sure. So you definitely captured it, which is it's a data gap, right? And Transit Rewards, I consider it a data analytics company that's collecting and analyzing data for transit about its users, its clientele. And right now, of course, we want to give transit the ability to use that to optimize their system, design the routes, send the buses in the right places. But if we actually had Canadians across the country using this app, and the app tracks kilometers in the same way across the country, it's possible to work with the federal government to say, you know what, these people are not taking cars. And because they're not taking cars and they're taking transit, and we can track it and we can audit it and we've got the clear data that demonstrates it, those should count as carbon credits. And that would allow us federally under the Clean Fuel Standard to say transit agencies can now exchange the kilometers you take on transit for carbon credits. Well, right now, carbon credits are exchanged on the international marketplace, well, the Canadian marketplace to start with, anywhere between $120 a carbon ton to $200. And the price is going up now that Mark Carney has said, okay, we'll build a pipeline from Alberta to BC only if the oil and gas sector buys a whole bunch of carbon credits. Right. So that just drove demand on the carbon credit market, which means prices will go up. This would allow transit agencies to say a whole bunch of Adams and Josipas have taken transit. They have not taken car travel. That has saved a certain amount of emissions and pollution. And that savings can and should be sold to the oil and gas sector that is trying to buy credits to offset its pollution at $120 to $200 a kilogram for carbon. That would result in hundreds of millions of new dollars for transit that they could use as not fair revenue, not due taxes, but essentially polluters are paying them and giving them money for carbon credits that they can turn into more buses, more services, more drivers, more mechanics. So that's the overall goal, and that would change our carbon market to allow for the first time ever transit agencies to actually generate money from the pollution they're saving.
That's amazing. And really what it does is when we talk about sustainability, beyond kind of the environmental, it creates a sustainable model for those agencies to keep operating outside of the continuous pressures that, you know, we're feeling at municipal levels in terms of our property taxes.
Yeah, 100%. And it also incentivizes finally in transit optimal performance, and it incentivizes transit agencies to compensate people, even though it's a micro loss in the short term, compensate them because you want that retained client, because the long term is they're going to make you money on the carbon, right? Yeah. And that right now, we don't have any of those incentives.
Do you see this as an enabler of these transit agencies? They're giving them an ability to see themselves as a business versus as a public service or as you know, something
social
that's more
welfare.
Infrastructural.
Yep.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And I've often said, like, I think transit is often treated as the poor cousin of automotive. And then from a transit perspective, most people who run transit agencies, great people, but they are lifetime civil servants and bureaucrats. Yeah. So it's a bureaucratic position. And a lot of times people come into running transit agencies from having done waterworks or utility or anything else in cities or municipalities or regions. They're not necessarily coming in because they know how to create and drive a business that attracts a clientele and retains a clientele. This allows them to monetize their data and create a capital plan and an operational plan tied on what is essentially new profits. I'm not saying privatize transit by any stretch of the imagination. It still needs to be subsidized by the taxpayer, but this is an injection of a lot of potential new cash, and not just the carbon credits, the retained rider. Yeah. You know, most transit agencies in this country will have about 30 to 50% of their overall budget come from riders, which is private capital, like it's the customer, right? Yep. If you're in Toronto, it's on the higher end. If you're a smaller city, it's on the lower end. But somewhere 30 cents to 50 cents on the dollar is coming from the rider. And the rider generally in this country gets a kick in the pants.
Right.
Like you get a slow bus that doesn't come when you want. It's not comfortable. Like you're being forced to pay for a service that's not top notch. But with this, you actually start to get not just the information about where people are going and where they want to go, but the feedback. The real-time feedback that says, hey, head of Windsor Transit, I'm not happy about this. I want compensation. And it creates the business mentality at a transit agency to say, and we should compensate you because this is what we did to you that ruined you as a customer. We made it hard for you to be a loyal customer. We're going to compensate you to bring you back, just the way stores do, the way Aeroplan does, the way Via Rail even does, and even Go Train has finally started saying, hey, if we're 15 minutes late, you get your ticket back, right? So those kinds of customers are critical to the growth of transit. And you can only get them when you reward them and recognize them as customers and not as obligated riders of a social welfare service.
Really cool. So we've talked a lot about how many layers there are to this. This is an ambitious product, an ambitious platform. You're balancing startup speed with institutional bureaucracy. How are you managing that right now?
A lot of alcohol? No. So it is true. In public transit, which I entered into about 12 years ago, running a technology consortium in transit, I was new to transit. And what I didn't appreciate at that time, having come from automotive research and so on, was public transit is monolithic. It's low volume in the sense of vehicles and software. And they purchase as cities, so they do requests for proposals, and it's slow. And you can build all the relationships you want, but at the end of the day, you have to go into a competitive RFP that has 10 layers of bureaucrats assessing who wins. And so it's a harder sell. It's a long burn. You have to have the relationships to convince people to launch an RFP and then hope that you will be evaluated at the top of that pile. So large firms that overpromise and overcharge tend to win because they will bid on any manner of anything, undercut the competition, and then it's a bait and switch once they're into a contract. And transit, like most city contracts, are very slow to switch provider, even when they're unhappy with the provider. So what you have to balance is, the truth is, I don't think I could have started Transit Rewards without having 10 years of transit experience under my belt, where I met most general managers of transit in this country at least once and many, many, many times over, because those relationships are critical to somebody opening the door and saying, all right, we might consider a pilot in an idea that is, in my view, not radical. It's so obvious, but in their view, radical because they're worried about, do they have to install sensors or near-field communication devices or anything else that's going to cost them money. So to convince people to trust the idea of a pilot, they have to trust you as a human being, and that comes with years of experience in the industry. So I would say probably more than most industries, you have to have the relationships to be able to launch a startup in transit.
Yeah, absolutely. We talk a lot about this concept of like grit tech, which is like practical technologies that help to support the evolution of legacy industries. And transit is definitely in that. And it's all big systems that take a lot of pushing to move, and a lot of patience and a lot of nurturing in order to get those relationships right.
Yeah, it is true.
When they are right, things
you can move the world.
Incredible.
Well, and I'll give you an example, 2 examples from transit. One, when I was starting on this idea back in 2021, it was the pandemic. Now, I was thinking about it a couple years prior because I was thinking, why is there no loyalty program for transit? And a few agencies have tried a few micro programs, right? And like Via has Via rewards, right? But there's nobody that allows for 1 air miles equivalent across all of these agencies. And it was so guttingly obvious to me that this should happen. And I was right before the pandemic doing like a fundraiser golf thing. And I was in the golf cart with a few guys from one of these legacy companies. And the guy said to me, and he was a CEO, he said, Josipa, it's a great idea, but don't tell people about it until you have your pilots and do it behind closed doors. And I said, why? And he goes, because, and he named 2 companies, which are, they own a lot of the software business in transit. He said, they will sue you to stop you. And I thought, that's probably true because the legacy is so strong and the millions of dollars they make on annual renewals of software contracts is a huge business for them. So that was lesson number 1, right? And then lesson number 2 is when I was starting this during the pandemic and, starting to code it and build it out and so on. The automatic landscape is we'll go to the GTHA and integrate fare purchases and compete with Presto. But Presto is bureaucratic agency created by the province, you're going up against the province.
Right.
You can't go up against the province.
Yeah.
So the solution there to not be snuffed out by Presto or to be stopped before you can even get going is to start not on the fare side, to start on the loyalty side.
Right.
And then my goal is eventually to integrate the fare, but work with the Prestos and work with the digital card systems that are out there, rather than trying to replace them, absorb them.
Of course, yeah.
Because it is like these legacy systems or the monoliths that have the contracts, they are very well off. They're profitable companies or they're government agencies. And small startups can get eaten up and stomped out very quickly and have been.
For sure. Yeah, it's smart to show them eventually like what the value is to being a part of versus a competitor too. So that's really interesting.
Absolutely. And then the other thing you have to do in transit too is convince people that it's not more work for them.
Right.
Because I have to respect the fact that anybody in the transit agency, from the general manager down to like the project developer, delivery manager that I might work with, they're working a 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Now they might work more than a 9 to 5, but they're not being compensated on any kind of performance measures, right? So if they like move the world and they achieve great ridership, in general, they're not getting a bonus paycheck.
Right. Yeah.
So there isn't a huge incentive to work. I don't want to say work harder, but work more for the same paycheck.
Yeah.
So I have to show how this is going to make their job easier and lighter, not harder with more work.
Yeah.
And that is something you have to respect, because I can't show that it's going to personally make them money, because that's not how government pays its employees.
Yeah, no, in public service, it's if you're doing a really, really great job, less people are going to know about it.
100%.
Yeah.
That 100%. Maybe you'll get a career promotion, but it's not the same as like somebody got a bonus check, which really motivates activity,
for
right?
Sure. Yeah.
So I think those are part of why lots of companies don't even enter into transit or municipal contracting. It's hard. There's legacy companies. You have to have lots of relationships, and then you have to convince people it's not going to add to their workload.
Well, you're definitely taking a really, I think, thoughtful track on how to approach it. This program's almost at its end. We have the pitch finals coming up. But I'm curious, what's more clear for you coming out of ScaleUp than it was coming in?
Definitely what's clearer for me is the market opportunity. When I walked in, I thought, okay, well, there's so many people in Canada and so many more have to take transit. But having come into ScaleUp, I've really refined, well, what is the market? And that market is that 4 million people. How many of them could access it? Well, the people who have smartphones, which is about 90% of those people. And then how many do I want to get going in the first few years? Well, I want to get going about 1 million of them. So a quarter of the market is feasible. That coming in, I had a very blurry idea of like, it's a big market, but I have to say ScaleUp has really helped to focus the accessible market and what's the art of the possible, so that you can convince angel investors that this is a serious deal.
That's brilliant. Well, we're so excited to see the mountains that you continue to move with this project, and so excited to be a partner in it as you continue on. Thank you so much for trusting us with your journey.
Well, thank you for your help and all of the coaching investment. I mean, we wouldn't be where we are without your help.
Well, we do it because we really value the companies that we get to work with and the vision that you're able to bring to the table. So best of luck, and we'll see you very shortly.
Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.